and welcome to Finger Lakes One Studio with my producer, Zach Cornett. Very happy to be here. I drive up from the Southern Tier, and I have to tell you, that last few miles as I'm driving into beautiful Seneca Falls is just amazing. And today is such a gorgeous day in this beautiful town. I love it here. I'm Debbie Morello, and this is The Power of Friends at Work, where we discuss issues from my upcoming book, The Power of Friends at Work. We talk about trust, communication, boundaries, loyalty, conflict, networking, whatever we can do to help you in your work career. And today I have an incredibly special guest. I'm so excited. I have Jesan Sorrells. Now here's Jesan's book, Marketing for Peacemakers. And if you notice, I have it flagged on like every other page because once I started reading it, it's like, I gotta remember this, I gotta remember this. It's such a fabulous book, and he's got another one in the works, but I'm gonna let him talk about all of that. Now, if you see Jesan's shirt, you'll see that it says Be Roman, because you know how much I love my paisans. So I always have, like last month, Yvonne Canti, and so I brought Jesan, who's wearing his Be Roman shirt in honor of the Italianos. And we have a beautiful cranberry chablis, so we're toasting you. I love that we feature a Finger Lakes wine on each show because that's what we're about, the Finger Lakes, and gosh, it's great to be here. So, Benedict, and we'll have a wonderful show with Jesan Sorrells. So, Jesan, to get started, tell our viewers about yourself, what your life was like growing up, and just how you ended up being a corporate trainer today and what you focus on. So tell us a little bit about where you're coming from, my Romano friend.
Absolutely. Thank you, Debbie, for having me here on the show for The Power of Friends at Work. I'm very happy to be here. As you said before, my name is Jesan Sorrells. I am the CEO of Human Services Consulting and Training based out of Endicott, New York. And you're right, I am wearing a shirt. It does say Be Roman. But wait a minute, maybe it says a little bit more, Be unromantic. Oh, and we'll get into that today as well. But you wanted to know about my origin story. You asked me about, how did I get here and how did I sort of mold myself into this brand and mold myself into a CEO of a corporate training and a consultancy firm based out of the Southern Tier. Well, origin stories are fascinating. We love the origin story of like Spider-Man, Peter Parker walking along, minding his own business, gets bitten by a spider, or Superman, who comes from the red sun of Krypton to the yellow sun of the earth and has these amazing powers, or Batman, who, his parents died in a botched robbery and then built himself up into this heroic thing, right? We love origin stories. I'm fascinated by origin stories, so I'm glad that you asked me about that. My origin story is very simple. I was born many years ago, but not that many years ago, but many years ago. Went through college and spent about 10 years in higher education, working as a residence director at a variety of different higher education institutions. And what this practically means is I used to work with and live with 18 and 19-year-olds and help them get through their first year transitional experiences, these formative experiences. And in the course of going through those formative experiences and guiding students through those formative experiences, I was able to help them through the kinds of things you talk about coming up in the workplace, okay? Things like conflict management, things like dealing with difficult people, things like negotiating, mediating, figuring out what the right things are to say and what the wrong things are to say, active listening, all those kinds of basic skills that employers ask for. Upon moving to upstate New York from Minnesota, I worked at Ithaca College for about a year and a half, maybe 18 months, and then fell in love, got married, moved to Endicott, New York, and started my business with $50 in my pocket, and I knew nobody. As a matter of fact, I got connected to you through the power of, and I want to talk a little bit about this today as well, through the power of social media. These new social tools we have that are great for us, that allow us to engage with each other. I mean, we're pushing this show out through YouTube, which we couldn't have done 25 years ago. We couldn't have done this in 1986. The internet is winning. And for us to be successful, and I staked my success on the internet. So I started blogging, and I started walking around and talking to people. Again, $50 in my pocket, not knowing knowing anybody, not having any networks, any connections, and really step by step, stage by stage, have built what is becoming a 7-figure consulting business and corporate training business designed to provide value to a wide variety of different clients across a number of different sectors. That's my origin story. My master's degree is in conflict resolution and reconciliation from Abilene Christian University in Abilene, Texas. In the course of me getting my master's degree, I became a certified divorce and family mediator, which is a friendly way of saying I help people who used to love each other and now don't, and help them divide up the assets. And that's another space where you get to see people when they're really vulnerable, when they're really at their lowest point, when they're at one of the top 3 places where people experience trauma in their adult lives, where they might need a little bit of this Great Finger Lakes wine, that we have here today with us, and you get to guide them through those processes and show them a new way of engaging with the world. And by the way, these skills that they learn through the process of mediation, it isn't until later on that they realize they can apply them at work. So combining the work I did in higher education, plus my background in divorce and family mediation and my education there, I had a sort of a aha moment where I realized, hey, 60% of our time is spent at work. I think that's a statistic that's in your book, And 60% of our adult lives are spent at work with people that we did not pick, who we would not necessarily have a barbecue with or give a hug. And we are being asked to perform tasks with them that we may not necessarily agree with, or we may not necessarily be totally invested in, but are for the good of a collective. Wouldn't it be better if we just learned to get along better at work? And from this aha moment of conflict management, a whole bunch of other stuff started blooming and started coming to fruition. And now 5 years later, I'm sitting here talking to you.
I'll never forget how we met, because you contacted me through LinkedIn, and I thought, who is this man that has this incredible background, and he's local? And one of the things that we found throughout all of New York State is that a lot of the trainers are aging out, and to see this bright young face with that repertoire was just amazing, and I couldn't wait to meet you. And I don't know if you recall, but one of your early on trainings was from my division at SUNY Broome, because I loved what I heard when you talked about communication and listening and the whole aspect of conflict. So I wanted that for my own team, and when we saw you train, it was just like a marriage made in heaven. And the college, we've been able to use you over and over and over with so many companies. One other question about the Along the Way trip. Did you have any mentors? And who can you think of as a mentor, someone along the way that might have helped you? Absolutely.
I'm a person who comes from other places. I didn't just sort of pop up out of nowhere, right? And so my mother is a lawyer and has been working for the federal government for years and years and years. As a matter of fact, at the time of this taping, she's transitioning to Hawaii for a new assignment, and she's right around. She's your contemporary, let's say that, and so she's still doing things and still out in the world. My grandmother got her master's degree in teaching, and only missed one period in her thesis. This was something that she hit us 4 kids over the head with for years and years when we were kids, us grandkids, me and my 3 siblings. My father worked very, very hard in his life, both doing blue-collar work and mid-level management work. And so, these are the places that I come from. These are the people who really mentored me and educated me and grew me. But then as I got into and became an adult and got out into the world, I had mentors in college. I think of my bachelor's degree, which is in the fine arts, which gives me design thinking and gives me an idea of entrees into creative ways that people can get along. And it gives me a different way of seeing. So I think of my Russian printmaker teacher, Natalia Hermerska. She was a great professor. Shout out to Natalia. Fabulous woman, but very, 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 very Russian, very, very precise and very, very incisive. I think of an English instructor that I had who reminded me very much of my grandmother, a woman from Alabama who just, drove drove me to perfection in my English classes. I think of one of my other printmaking instructors, a woman named Jonathan Skinner, who just has an amazing visuality and an amazing ability to bring forth visuality. I actually did some work with her and did some long-term interning with her. I think of people that I ran into, and by the way, not all positive, by the way. I'm thinking of a former supervisor that I had at the University of Minnesota where we had a frictional relationship, and we had to work through that relationship together with each other because I wasn't going to quit and he didn't have the capacity to fire me. So how are you going to work through that relationship when it doesn't work out? That's a real form of mentoring there. But I think we have to be careful when we use the term mentoring, Debbie. Right. And I think all of us watching need to be careful when we think about this. So there's supervision, which is firefighting, sort of the day-to-day, getting things out the door kind of act. There's management, which is a little bit of a higher level act. That's focusing on goals. Then there's this idea of coaching, which coaching can happen in both supervision and management. And coaching is the idea that you will get a little bit better one step at a time. And I played rugby. I'm a rugby guy, and I coach rugby. And so in rugby, you coach people. You got to go to the breakdown here, and you got to chase this thing there, right? And when you go to the breakdown and when you are guiding people there, some people you can grab by the face mask or grab by the jersey and motivate them, and they'll go out and do that. And then other people, if you do that, they'll pull back, they'll pull away. So you have to be careful as a coach when you think about your vocal inflections and language that you pick, and the process that you are going through. Coaching is always a process, but mentoring is a relationship. Mm-hmm. Mentoring is about, I'm going to have you over for a barbecue. Mentoring is about, I'm going to introduce you to my kids. Mentoring is about, you're going to become part of my life. And most of us, and I would argue most of our viewers here today, can probably only name maybe one or two or three really impactful mentors in their lives.
The committed
mentors, the ones who were really interested in seeing you grow beyond where they met you, going to the next step, and then going beyond that, and going beyond that, and going beyond that. And that ability to subsume the self to another in order to see that other grow and take pleasure from that, that's truly at the core of mentorship.
You're mentoring so many young people today through your business. It just amazes me. You're working with the university and bringing students along, and I just see the growth. And those are the trainers of the future. Those are the leaders of the future. And you're doing so much with young people. It's inspiring, Jesan.
Well, thank you. And look. I am playing a long game. I say this a lot to clients when I go in and we talk about conflict, right? Mm-hmm. Some clients want to have silver bullet solutions for conflict, and I don't sell silver bullet solutions. So if you're looking to hire me, I'm not selling silver bullet solutions. But what I am looking to do is sell solutions that work. And the solutions that work are ones that take a long time. They are the ones that take a long time to implement. They are the ones that take a long time to see fruit come about from them. Mm-hmm. Look, I love the old Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So plant the tree, plant the seed for that tree now, but wait and water it and let it grow. Look, this is not to convict or condemn. So if you've done poor things in the past with conflict, or you haven't managed conflict effectively in the past, that's a sunk cost. And we could talk a little bit about sunk cost fallacies and things like that. But let's not throw good money after bad. Instead, let's say, you know what? We did that. We didn't do it well. And now guess what? We have a new opportunity to do it better now, starting with a guy like Jesan or any of the other kinds of trainers that we have in the Southern Tier that are also doing great work. But also any of the other folks that you may be coming across at any point in time. And look, we live in a world right now with the internet, and I want to double back to this again, where there has been an explosion of information around organizational behavior. Mm-hmm. From David Burkus, the author who I had on my podcast recently, all the way to Malcolm Gladwell and Dan Ariely and everybody in between, there's been this explosion in research and information around psychology, sociology, motivation, inspiration, success mindsets. If you go on entrepreneur Instagram, you see leadership quotes and motivational quotes and inspirational quotes designed to motivate and move people to doing a better thing. So there's a ton of resources. There's no shortage of resources, but I fundamentally believe there is a shortage of wisdom. And wisdom is something that you get through the long, step-by-step, moment-by-moment, day-by-day grind of putting in the work on really developing a relationship with somebody and going through those great heights and those low valleys to get to the point where your conflicts are not as deleterious and damaging as they might have been in the past.
I like what you said about the tree, and it's never too late to start.
Never too late.
Do you consider yourself to be a futurist? And in that capacity, what do you see for the future of training? As you're working with a lot of companies now, and I think that you're seeing the tremendous need for transition management, for change, managing for change and transformation and so forth. But what do you see down the road that you're going to be training on and teaching other people to train on?
Down the road. Well, I'm playing a long game.
Are you a futurist?
I am a futurist.
I thought so.
I am, my hashtag is building for the future, right? Every single thing that we do today, we are putting a block in the, I used to play with Legos when I was a kid. We're putting a block in the road that we are building for our children. I have 4 kids, and I look at my youngest, who's 18 months old, and I wonder what kind of work world is he going to be in, and what kind of work world is he going to be managed in and supervised in. And so when I think about the future of training, one thing that I want to be very, very clear on in our interview today is that leadership training, management training, I want to get this out to all organizations as clearly as I possibly can, is worth the investment. The generation that was born between 1984 roughly and 1997, the much maligned or much talked about or much written about millennial generation, is a generation that will lead us into the future. There's 85 million of them. The numbers are undeniable. That's the only number you need to know if you're watching this show today. And though that cohort of 85 million people as individuals believe in lifelong learning as an aspect of empathetic growth. Now, because this is going to go out online, you can rewind that and watch that again. I'm not going to repeat it, but you can rewind it and watch it again. Okay. Organizations that are committed, genuinely committed to lifelong learning through bringing in qualified trainers to develop their people will succeed. And the organizations that do not do this, or give it short shrift, or think that it is unimportant, or think that it's a one-off thing, will not succeed. They will fail. They will collapse.
They'll leave. The millennials will leave. They won't stay.
They won't stay. And here's the thing. Not only will the millennials leave, but the generation coming behind them will leave.
Right.
And then the generation coming behind them will leave.
Right.
And we will have massive open territory of failed organizations, or here's something even worse, suboptimal, subpar organizations that might be getting revenues just enough to survive and might be getting product out the door that's just good enough, but just good enough isn't good enough anymore. And by the way, these kinds of investments that you're making in leadership training in the future and in the future of training as organizations, and I want to talk about it on the provider end too, but let's talk about it on the consumer end first in a B2B context. Those organizations that are consuming this training, consuming this content, yeah, you can do webinars, but that's like your base level. And yeah, you can do in-person, on-site, face-to-face like what I do and what other qualified trainers do. You can absolutely do that. And you can invest in the coaching and in the mentoring and all that. And you should be doing that at every single level of your organization. You should be thinking intentionally, that's a huge part of this too, intentionally about the development of every single one of your employees, from the CEO all the way down to the janitor. You can do all of that and still get caught blinded, still get blindsided by something that you didn't see coming. But here's the thing you didn't see coming won't impact you. The change you didn't see coming in technology or culture or society or politics, that thing that's impacting the externalities of your organization, your revenues and your profits, those externalities, those things won't be, the impact won't be as bad or as deep as if you did not invest. I think of Zig Ziglar, and we all come from the root of Zig Ziglar. We all do. All of us do who are doing this work out here. And I think of what good old Zig used to say back in the day. He said, people would come to him and say, well, old Zig, you're doing good sales training here. You're doing good inspirational training. If I bring you in and my people are inspired to leave, what good was the training? And Zig said, and I'm paraphrasing here, this is Jesan quoting Zig, but, paraphrasing here, but Zig said, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? And that's a great way of thinking about this, and that redounds to the future. Now, you asked me a second part of this interesting question, which is about the training organizations. And I don't want to start a problem with anybody on the show. I'm not here to start a problem. But I do want to say this. I think that training organizations, and I'm seeing some shifts in the training field, the training and development field. And the training and development field is huge. You go from talent development to leadership development, and we have different layers inside of the field. We have people who started off like myself as people with $50 in their pocket and rose to being freelancers and are very happy doing that kind of work, all the way to people who combined in consultancies and people who are like myself, thinking of themselves as entrepreneurs who are trying to build organizations bigger than themselves. We have massive organizations at the top like Dale Carnegie and Fred Pryor that have been providing training services for years. And then, of course, we have very niched large providers like Sandler that have been providing sales training in a very niched space for years and years and years and are doing very quality work. But here's the thing. I want to tell all those people who are running those organizations, I don't care whether you're a freelancer operating out of your house or whether you're the CEO of Dale Carnegie, I want to say something here very important. For training providers, technology and size are the things that we need to be focused on in the future. And by technology, I mean we are underrating the importance of augmented reality and virtual reality on training in the future.
I totally agree.
We are totally underrating it. We're totally not talking about it. And if we are talking about it, we're noodling around the edges and we're not fully committing. We're not fully going in because we're thinking that, and I think we're thinking erroneously in the training and development field, that organizations will still always pay a premium, or maybe a little bit less than a premium, but still a premium for a human being to show up. And my only question to the Dale Carnegies and the Fred Pryors and the Sandlers of the world is this: why do you keep thinking that?
I think people like to make the social connection of somebody with them in the training room.
Sure.
But that, again, is a certain age group.
Correct.
And the millennials and those that follow don't have that same need. They're getting their connection in a different way.
In a different way. And I think augmented reality is a way for that connection to happen. I think virtual reality, I've seen some amazing and interesting things that human services consulting and training is going to be investing in and developing in the next few years. Some amazing places that we are going in the space of augmented reality and virtual reality. Some things that we are looking at with machine learning and data analytics and combining those things with interesting algorithms, not to remove the human being, remove the human experience, but to enhance the human experience in the room, to make the human experience in the room more of a premium, not less. Because the future that I see, you talked about the future that I see is a future where an organization hires a trainer like myself. That trainer shows up in a pair of glasses that you're wearing, like Princess Leia in the original Star Wars, and delivers in-person content and delivers it virtually while you're sitting in your pajamas, just sort of hanging out. And Zach is nodding his head back here, and Debbie's nodding her head over there.
It's the future.
And that's the future. You asked me what the future is. That's the future. Now, what happens after that? Well, I can only comfortably predict maybe 30, 40 years out. But longer term also, I think we have to look at the moves that Google is making around information technology. I think if you're not under the wing of Google, which is under the wing of the dragon, and we can talk about what they're currently doing. But Google, I think, even more so than Apple or maybe even Facebook, Google is an interesting company because they are doing some things, they are making some moves to come out of the internet into the world.
Yeah.
And they are probably going to be, and I've written about 4 blog posts about this, and you can go check out my blog if you would like to read these. It's called the Network Leap. They are basically going to leap out of our computers, leap out of our screens, and leap into the world. And they're going to do this in a variety of different ways, from self-driving cars to Google Glasses, which everybody laughed at, but actually was an experiment that will sort of kind of work later on.
It'll get further developed. I think you're right. It was kind of in the developmental stages, and they put it aside. But it has to. It has
to work.
My son was doing a conference in Washington D.C., and they had robots.
Yeah.
So the robots would see the lecture, but then the robot was also visiting vendor to vendor to vendor, so you get to see all the vendor displays. It was like a totally different model.
Yeah.
So anyway, thinking about the future and thinking about those 4 wonderful children that you have, 18-month-old Jeremiah, who's super cute. Why did you bring his toys? Why did you steal his toys today? How could you do that to your kids?
How could I do this to my kids? How could I steal my kids' toys? So let me talk about the toys that I brought today. Thank you for bringing that up, Debbie. So I wanted to find a way to talk about this. So when we think about, as trainers and developers, when we think about leaping from being, and by the way, I was a freelancer. I love freelancing. There are times when it gets to be stressful, when it gets to be too much, I'm like, well, I could just always go back to my house. Freelancing is great, and I've done freelancing. There's a difference between freelancing, consulting, and being an entrepreneur. And I want to talk about mindsets here, because this really matters. So for a freelancer, the mindset, and I'm borrowing this, by the way, as the spiritual child of Seth Godin combined with Gary Vaynerchuk in this moment. So the idea that as a freelancer, you're going to pay a little more, but you're going to get a little more value for the client, that's the mindset that the freelancer has to have. And the freelancer doesn't need a whole lot of ducks in order to be a freelancer successfully. Sometimes a freelancer only needs 1 duck. Mm-hmm. That duck might be their education. That duck might be their degree. That duck might be a set of certifications they have. That duck might be their life experience. They only need 1 duck. And they don't need it to be in a row, quite frankly. They just need to figure out which duck it is and get moving. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. But a consultant is even more interesting, because a consultant is sort of that mid-range between a freelancer and an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And a consultant's hard job, and I've done this because I do consulting, the consultant's hard job is finding a client who will pay a premium for the advice that you are giving. That's the hard part.
Right.
The hard part is not the duck in that scenario, a different duck though. The duck in that scenario is not the advice. Many consultants confuse the advice giving part with the client finding part. And those 2 things are 2 different ducks. And you don't need them both, again, to be in a row. You just need 1. But an entrepreneur, there's been an explosion in entrepreneurship and in the cult of entrepreneurship. Again, I go through my entrepreneurship Instagram, or I go through my Facebook page on entrepreneurship, or I go through YouTube videos. And there are a ton of good motivational entrepreneurs out there, from Andy Frisella to Gary Vaynerchuk to Casey Neistat to Chase Jarvis. I mean, I could just name and name and name and name. And then, of course, when you go out of the digital realm, there are entrepreneurs that are hugely gigantic visionaries, like Elon Musk, or say what you want, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's everybody in between. And I'm not just talking about tech entrepreneurs. I'm talking about people who start grocery delivery services and kit services, all the way to makeup services and things like that. Like Kylie Jenner, by the time of this recording is released, will probably be a billionaire by that point, And yeah, Zach, I know, but she'll probably be at $1 billion, And we can talk about how she made that money and why she made that money in the way that she did. But the mindset is the thing that matters. The mindset of an entrepreneur is the thing that matters. And what I want to talk about is the mindset thing. And this is where the ducks come in. Mm-hmm. Too many people stop themselves from being entrepreneurs because they believe that they need a certain type of, or a certain number of, or a certain set of ducks in a row, and that key thing there is in a row in order to be successful. Well, the thing is, you may only have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 ducks. And this is why I bought them today. They may only be a handful. They have a handful of ducks, and they're not in a row, they're not in order, and you don't know which ones are good or bad. You don't know which ones will work, and you don't know which ones won't work. And so here's the thing that you have to do in your entrepreneurial mindset. You have to not have your ducks in a row. You have to just pick a duck, put it down, and start. And then along the way, very gradually, very, very succinctly, you will begin to get another duck, and you'll put that duck in a row. And then you'll get another duck, and you'll put it in a row there. And then you'll get another duck, and you'll put it in a row there. And pretty soon, you'll have a row of ducks. But by that point in the entrepreneurial journey, you won't care what order those ducks are in. And here's the thing, the people for whom you are providing value, the organizations, the customers, the clients you are serving won't care either. So I said this at a previous event that you invited me to about how to be a corporate trainer, which was very narrowly focused, but I want to revisit it. Everyone can start. Everyone has a duck. Everyone can start. Everyone has an origin story like we talked about previously. Everyone has a series of experiences, life experiences, educational experiences, credentialing. Don't worry so much about, well, did I have the right insurance? Or do I have the right building? Or do I have the right clothes? Or I'll go even deeper than that. Am I the right skin color? Or am I putting myself in a posture in the right way in the market? Just pick a duck, line it up, and start going, and you will get more ducks as you go. Entrepreneurs start things. Steve Jobs infamously said back in the day that a good artist ships. And he was exactly correct about that. And I had a lot of other problems with the cult of Steve Jobs and all that, but the point of that line, real artists ship, is that getting the duck in a row is not the important thing. The important thing is recognizing you have it and then using it. Starting.
Wonderful. Start today.
Start today.
Wherever you're at.
Wherever
Don't wait
you're
for
at.
things to be perfect.
Yeah, because perfection never comes.
Will be.
Perfection never comes. Like this idea that somehow things are going to be perfect and that things are just going to somehow sort of work out, or that, you know, if I don't start, if I just wait, like, I would love to talk about what it takes to be an overnight success, because that's on the other side of the entrepreneurial journey, the other side of the entrepreneurial cult that we're building in this country, is this idea that somehow you're gonna get one duck, you're going to get that duck going. Let's say it's an online affiliate marketing program, and in 6 months you're going to be Mark Zuckerberg. Well, you're not. You know, it took me. I love you, Debbie, but it took me. It took me 15 years to walk into your office. I've been working on this project, this thing I'm doing now, since I was 12.
Yeah.
I saw the ways my mother went through work and the experiences that she had at work.
Right.
I saw the experiences that my grandmother came through in her life. And then I went and I started working at 13, 14, 15 and had experiences. My first job was cleaning dog kennels and cleaning toilets. Like, I mean, you know, those kinds of things, right? And I saw what worked and I saw what didn't. I waited tables. I performed. I did all kinds of things. And then I gradually got more ducks, and I got more education. And then, I made eyeglasses for a while. And then I went to college. And in college, I began to realize, there's no rules here. That's entrepreneurial thinking, by the way. And you can sort of bend this rule here and this rule here. And so I started clubs and organizations. I started a literary magazine at a community college that I went to in New Jersey. For a couple of years, that is still going today. So, I mean, like, start something.
I want to segue back to what you've seen, because you've seen so much in the companies. I'm going to go to your duck that's the consulting training duck.
Yeah, consulting training duck.
and segue back to that, because I'm really curious. You do a lot of work. I mean, every time we're on the phone, you're working. You're out there
absolutely.
doing your thing, and you do it so beautifully. What are the issues related to work relationships that you're seeing in the workplace when you go in? What are the things that people tell you related to trust, loyalty, boundaries, those kinds of things? What are you hearing on the streets in the companies where you and businesses and organizations where you work?
Yeah, you're right. I do have my ear to the ground, and I do hear a lot of things. As a matter of fact, that has influenced the title of my upcoming book in September, which is It's called My Boss Doesn't Care. 100 essays on disrupting your workplace by disrupting your boss. And it'll be available for you on Amazon and a bunch of other outlets. So we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end.
What a great title!
This idea that And that's one of the main things I'm hearing, one of the main pieces of feedback I'm hearing. So you talked about the issues. Let's start with that. So some of the core issues that I am hearing about on the ground from people include, and really they all sort of focus around one core area, but they include lack of empathy, lack of communication with respect, more of a concern, as Simon Sinek would say, about the revenue at the end of the quarter rather than the life of a human being inside of an organization. More concern with, did we ship the product versus did we ship the product well? And by the way, confusion, this is the last one, about what the work actually is. This is an idea I got from Seth Godin, the idea of doing linchpin work. I read his book, Linchpin, by the way, great book. I would recommend picking it up if you're doing anything in any of this space. But linchpin is this idea that everyone, in his book he explores this, everyone at work can become indispensable. And through becoming indispensable, you become, in essence, unfireable, even if you're fired. But so many people, after going through the K through 12 educational system, where we are taught compliance, where we are taught to sit nicely in a row, raise our hand, answer to the test, tell the teacher what the teacher wants to hear. We go through 12 years of that, and then if we go on to higher education, then we get another 14, 16, 18 years of that. After 18 years of one milieu, we are then forced into a workplace that is rapidly changing. It is no longer blue ocean strategy, it's now red roiling ocean strategy, where we are being asked to innovate and to make decisions and to be independent, and our employer is looking at us saying, if you don't do this kind of thing, you will be fired. So now there's pressure to comply in spaces and areas where we haven't had the growth that we needed to have since we were 6 years old. And is it any wonder that now, when that friction points come up, people, not just in the millennial generation, but in Generation X and a little bit in the baby boomer generation, are starting to say, no, I'm going to opt out. I'm going to go do something else. It's no wonder. So this lack of empathy, this lack of respect on the part of organizations, and by the way, organizations are made up of people, and people are good at an individual level. I firmly believe that. The individual supervisor or manager is not to blame for this. The individual management person is not to blame for this. It's a culmination of a series of decisions that have been made since, quite frankly, we started setting up the modern work systems that started with John Dewey and Frederick Winslow Taylor at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, along with a very interesting guy named Henry Ford, at the beginning of the 20th century. Well, guess what? It is 2018, getting ready to be 2019. And we are at the end of the Industrial Revolution, and we have been for a while. This requires a new way of thinking, a new operating system, as Dan Pink would say, based on autonomy, mastery, and purpose, based on respect and empathy.
I love that you brought up respect and empathy, and I particularly love that you brought up Simon Sinek, because he's one of my superheroes on video. But Simon Sinek says, his theme is leaders eat last, but he also says leaders speak last. And I love this, because I have sat and I was one of those kids like in school that was always like to the teacher, call on me, call on me, call on me. And so with the enthusiasm, I always love to speak, I love to talk, I love to get in there. But I worked with a gentleman. He was our vice president for finance. Those finance guys, they control all the money, they can afford to keep quiet. But this was the guy that sat at a meeting and listened what everyone else said before he ever said a word. And I thought, what a great lesson. But it was also showing deference, showing respect, and showing empathy, because he chose to go last. And you know that we hung on every word that he said, because while he was listening, not prejudging, he was just listening. You mentioned active listening as an attribute that people can benefit from. And you mentioned so much, but I want to kind of hone in on what you do with conflict, because I'd like to know the methodology that you use. Like, how does conflict work, and how do you help the companies that you're working with in the workplace address conflict?
Yeah. So conflict always, everywhere, all the time, is a process of change. No great change not one happens without conflict. If you can name a great change that has happened without conflict, please tell me. I challenge the viewers here. Write me, email me, tweet me, Instagram message me, DM me, whatever you got to do. I'm all over the place. Find me, show me, give me the examples, make me a list, hound me on the internet. Show me what great change ever in the history of the world or in your personal history, what great change, impactful change has happened without conflict. Conflict is always a process of change. That's the first philosophical thing that we have to agree on. Or if we don't agree on it, then this is the thing that we can tussle over. But conflict is a process of change. Number two, thus meaning that conflict is inevitable. Conflict is always inevitable because we are always changing. But it's a process rather than a moment and then it's done. Number two, philosophically, we've got to understand that conflict is neither positive nor negative, but the things we bring to it are and can be. So our behaviors, our mindsets, our past experiences, our history, those things are positive and negative. We do attach good and bad. We attach the language and the words to these kinds of things. But the conflict in and of itself merely exists. It's sort of in that space. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing that we have to consider, and I think we have to consider this very, very carefully when we think about methodology around conflict, is that interpersonal violence is not inevitable. Bullying, harassment, we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years, the growing emphasis on the #MeToo movement and all these kinds of things where people's bad behavior is being exposed that either walked up to the level of interpersonal violence or was interpersonal violence. Interpersonal violence is not inevitable. Matter of fact, interpersonal violence is a choice that we make. We choose to engage in these kinds of behaviors, and sometimes, that no matter what the circumstance, but many times we choose intentionally to engage in these behaviors, and we can talk a lot about that. But interpersonal violence is not inevitable, okay? So conflict doesn't have to lead to interpersonal violence. So that's the three pillars of the methodology that I use. And when I go into organizations, we start off with this idea that conflict is a process of change. Mm-hmm. And then I want to know what your style, your approach to conflict is. So we do a conflict management survey, and I sort of figure out, are you an accommodator? Are you an avoider? Are you an attacker? Are you power-oriented, right? Or are you a compromiser? Are you oriented towards negotiation? Are you oriented towards accommodation? Or here's a big one, are you oriented towards avoidance as a way of life versus as a strategy or a temporary tactic? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Once we figure out your conflict style, once we figure out how you're moving, then we can get tactical.
So I'm an avoider. What would you tell if I were in a situation at work where,
Sure.
I've seen avoiders that talk about people behind their back. I
Absolutely.
hope I don't do that. But I hate conflict. I hate it. Mm-hmm. I would rather run the other way to avoid it at all costs, and then afterwards I feel like I was exploited.
Right.
How do you help an avoider? A lot of people are avoiders.
A lot of people are avoiders, but I will say this for avoiders: avoidance sometimes gets a dirty rap. Sometimes avoidance is necessary. Sometimes you do need to avoid a conflict in order to protect yourself, in order to protect what you've earned, or in order to protect what you value. Sometimes avoidance is appropriate, but avoidance as a long-term way of life, as a pattern of long-term behavior, if you, and I say this often, if you like the outcomes you're getting from avoidance, don't change it, you're fine. Mm-hmm. Don't change it, keep avoiding. If you like the outcomes you're getting, but if you don't like them, as you pointed out, you may not like them. If you don't like them, if you feel exploited, if you feel as though you were somehow manipulated or run over, now we can do something. Now we can have a conversation. And so with an avoider in that situation, I would sit with them and I would talk with them and I would say, listen, what is it about the process of change that you're avoiding?
I typically, the good angel, says I'm avoiding hurting another person because I fear my own temper.
Bingo. You just stop. You just said the key word there, fear.
Okay.
Fear is the key thing there. We have to work on your fear. What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of that? Are you thinking consequentially 30 miles down the road and trying to avoid something that may not happen? Which if you are, then you're doing something in your head where you have an image of an outcome that may not match your reality. Which means in essence, you're stealing autonomy from somebody else.
Yeah.
You're stealing from them the right to have their own responses. Or If your fear is of something that you might do, a response that you might have, or a reaction that you might have, now we may want to take a deep dive in the opposite direction into you. And I don't do therapy and I don't do counseling, I do coaching. And sometimes some people do need therapy to deal with those fears. Sometimes people do need counseling to deal with those fears. I've done therapy, I've done counseling, I understand the importance of that entire milieu, and I may use therapeutic language or set up therapeutic paradoxes, but I don't do therapy. But I will say this, if that's something that you need in order to deal with those fears, and in order to address them, and to dance with them, not to eliminate them, but to dance with them in a conflict and to recognize when they are happening, and then to say, yes, this is fear, yes, it's okay. A client of mine one time said something very interesting. She said, if it feels like you're going to throw up in your mouth when you're going to say something, you probably should say it.
Beats thrown up in your mouth.
Beats thrown up in your mouth, right? And this is the thing with avoidance, right? Avoidance gets a bad rap, but here's the thing: avoidance comes from fear.
Well, I'm thinking about the young people today. I wonder if there are a lot of avoiders, because have you heard of this whole thing with ghosting?
Yes.
I kind of think I invented it. I was always the woman that would be, one or two times I'd say, honey, I think we're having a setback. And then boom, I was gone. Okay? I did that. Whenever I left a job, it was like, okay, a little setback, boom, rather than deal with the consequences.
Right.
But I wonder if the younger generation tend to be avoiders, because, boy, there's a lot of that ghosting going on.
I don't think it's that they tend to be avoiders. I want to stand up for the younger generation. I want to stand up very strongly on this point.
Okay.
And I'm 39 years old. And so I'm right on I graduated high school in like 1997, so I'm right on the weird cusp of I'm not classified as a millennial, and I'm not classified as a Gen Xer. I'm in that weird middle ground, which is what most people are between like 35 and 43. We're the middle children of history. There's only like 10 million of us. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what we have to say, right? So, the Gen Xers suck up all the air out of the room. Like my sister is in her 40s and going into 40s and 50s. And then, the millennials suck all the rest of the air out of the room. Those are our younger brothers and sisters, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. We're middle children, but here's the thing. I look at us as linchpins, right? We're the ones that can travel back and forth between the territories and tell the boomers what the millennials are thinking, and then tell the millennials what the Gen Xers are thinking, and then tell the Gen Xers what the millennials are thinking, and then we can set up this dialogue. So let me say this. I want to stand up for the younger generation, and I want to say this. The world we built for them is a world where we deprioritized confrontational skills.
Good point. It wasn't their fault.
It wasn't their fault.
Right.
Like technology. So Simon Sinek, going back to Simon Sinek again, talks about technology and parenting. Parenting and technology combined with impatience set up a world for them where immediacy and speed is the thing that matters to resolution, rather than the long, slow slog that I talked about previously in that tree planting analogy from the Chinese. Rather than teaching them that, they taught them that speed and immediacy to the breakdown was the thing that mattered. And you have a generation that has confused the speed of the internet, and I write this down, and it's going to be in my book, but the speed of the internet search with the speed of resolution. And interpersonal relationships based on confrontation and growing and doing the things of having the friction and going back and forth with folks and bumping and moving and saying yes when you mean no and saying no when you mean yes and da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. All of this stuff has been washed out of their experience by people older than them who set up the world for them. We forget Steve Jobs and Bill Gates are both baby boomers. We forget that. Mark Zuckerberg, we talk a lot about Facebook and the Facebookification of communication. Well, he's a little bit of an older millennial, but he only came about because of the work that Steve and Larry Ellison, who's a generation older than Bill, and Bill did. All these guys, right, set up this world for us. And so we set up the world, we set up the rules, and they're just calling our bluff. The lack of confrontation skills is, to me, I'm coming out of my seat on this a little bit because I'm excited about this. The lack of confrontation skills is an opportunity for organizations to train and develop those kinds of things. And I wish organizations would take on that role. It sucks to be you that parents and technology and culture didn't do that. I'm sorry, but if you are going to stop giving lip service to lifelong learning and start really meaning it, then leadership training, conflict management training, development training of any kind is worth paying for and worth investing.
Definitely. Now, what is your conflict style, and how do you when you're working with someone that you don't like or that you don't get along with? What is your style, and how do you address working with people that may not fit your style?
This is a great question, Debbie, because there's a recent incident I'm thinking of, and I won't name names, but there's a recent incident I'm thinking of that happened in a professional context where I had to work with somebody who, from my initial interaction with them, and again, I've known this person in the community sort of via email and tangentially and word of mouth for a couple of years now, and I hadn't had a chance to work with them directly on a project for a third party. And so we got together and we were working on this project for the third party, and from the jump, from the moment we met, this individual decided that they were going to, and I know it's just their approach to life, but they were going to sort of get in my face and not necessarily be confrontational in a negative way, but sort of be confrontational as a way of being jokey or being humorous. And it rubbed me the wrong way immediately. And my mode of dealing with conflict is I'm a power-oriented person. I am. I'm in that lower fourth quadrant right there that's around attack, right? So when I am confronted in that way, my natural instinct, my baseline is to get hot and then go in, right? To cut people off at the knees, right? To do that sort of thing and then jet out, right? I'm a power-oriented person. And so recognizing that in myself, and after working on this stuff and thinking about this stuff and lecturing on it and presenting on it and researching on it and developing on it and writing on it and on and on and on, the years I've devoted to this have allowed me to see that in myself and recognize in the moment when it is happening to stop. And so I did. I stopped and I backed up internally and I thought, maybe this is just this person being this person. And the thing that I had to strangle inside of myself was the Jesan that was like, no, you want to fight. and put that person down, right? And say, no, you got to be quiet. And the other Jesan, the professional Jesan came out, and the professional Jesan then took the posture of, okay, I'm going to sidestep. I'm going to avoid. So in the interaction that I had with this individual, with this third party, I sidestepped and sidestepped and sidestepped and sidestepped and sidestepped and sidestepped and sidestepped until I was done with the interaction and out of the room. And I told somebody later on, in a different context, this is one of the reasons why it's really hard for me to work with folks that I don't respect. And by the way, in that interaction, the other individual kept going down the road that they had started off with already. And they had no clue that I was sidestepping them in order to avoid, I did use the word avoid a bigger problem later. So this is an example of knowing your baseline, knowing that avoidance is a tactical tool, and knowing when to use it. Diplomats do this all the time. Diplomats don't sit across the table from people that they like and, want to necessarily always accommodate or compromise with them. If they wanted to do that, I think of Lakhdar Brahimi, who was the United Nations envoy to Afghanistan after September 11th. And he had this great quote that's in a report that I use around dealing with difficult people, but he has this great quote that sticks with me. Lakhdar Brahimi said, the nice people are sitting in Paris. If I wanted to negotiate with the nice people, I would be sitting in Paris. But sometimes you have to negotiate, and this is me paraphrasing yet again, with the people who can get stuff done. And if I didn't want to sit across the table from bad people, I shouldn't have accepted this job. That's huge, right? And so knowing your baseline, knowing all of these other spaces in the quadrant of conflict, knowing that you can go to compromise if you would like, knowing that conflict is a process of change, knowing that it is inevitable, understanding yourself and doing that internal self-awareness temperature taking in the moment. I've had 10, 11, 12 years of working on this now. I don't walk into an organization and expect that people are going to pick this up inside of a 10-minute or 2-minute or 3-minute or 4-hour-long or day-long interaction. This is something where, much like Tony Robbins, if you want to engage in this process of change, I am a starter. I am a catalyst. I'm a change agent for you
You're
to think
builder.
about this. I'm a peace builder, right?
Which moves us to...
I'm a peace builder. And you got to think about this in these kinds of terms.
I could listen to you all day. I hate that we only have 6 minutes left.
We only have 6 minutes left.
But I'm going to slide this over and have you tell us all about marketing for peace builders, because it's such a great book.
So I did write this book. You can get it on Amazon.com. It is, I don't remember how much it is, but you can get it on Amazon.com. It's clearly, Debbie has marked it up and has gone through it. So the title of this book is Marketing for Peace Builders: How to Market Your Value to a World in Conflict. And I wrote this book for my fellow peace builders, folks who are in the space of mediation or conflict management or negotiation, because a lot of those folks have backgrounds that are in the human services or in psychology or sociology, and they didn't necessarily get business or marketing training. But I functionally believe this. The aspects of marketing, such as persuasion, such as the ability to do what we've just done today, have a conversation and tell a story and figure out an origin story. The ability to talk about in a really meaningful way, linchpin work. And I believe, by the way, that all my mediators, all my fellow peace builders, and this is a shout out to my fellow peace builders, you're bending the curve of the culture every time you engage one-on-one with a client. But you could bend it even better if you understood how to market yourself. We live with a conflict comfortable public that is skeptical of peace, because they believe functionally that peace means giving something up. They are romantic about conflict, and they need to be unromantic about conflict. They need to be romantic about peace. Look, peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is conflicts happening, but we're moving in a positive direction. The frictions are inevitable. And so the ways to do that, the ways to market yourself, from workshops and networking events, all the way to managing the digital tools that we now have, from email all the way to Instagram TV and everything else in between, are covered in this book, Marketing for Peace Builders, How to Market Your Value to a World in Conflict.
It was just so meaty. I couldn't believe there was just so much in there, and I love it. Really, you know what I like about your style? You're very pragmatic. You give a lot of tips. You're fun.
Yeah.
But you give a lot of you give a lot of tips on how to construct this, how to do this. I love the how-tos.
Yeah.
Because it's about technique as well. There's a philosophical and there's that whole piece to it, but there's also technique, so it's really valuable.
Yeah. It goes from the 50,000 foot level, and then it brings it all the way back down to the practical level, and then we go back to the 50,000 foot level, and then we bring it all the way back down to the practical level, and we do it in chapter after chapter after chapter. So it's a real easy read, but it's deceptively deep, as Debbie has said, and so please go out and pick yourself up a copy.
How can people find you, Jesan?
How can people find me? You can type my name, Jesan Sorrells, into your friendly search engine. If you don't want to be under the wing of Google, you can go to Bing, or you can go to Internet Explorer, whatever it's calling itself now. Whatever you like, right? You can type my name, Jesan Sorrells, into your nearest friendly search engine, and I will pop right up at the top. You can visit my website, www.hsconsultingandtraining, all one word, .com, and you can see my blog. I tend to publish, I used to publish every day. Now I'm publishing like 3 times a week. I'm trying to get back on the everyday mode. But I've got about 1,000 or 1,500 blog articles on my website where you can explore all of the kinds of things that we've just talked about today. I'm launching my personal branding website, so www.jesansorrells.com. It should be launched by the time you're watching this, and so you can go and visit that, and you can listen to my podcasts. So I have a couple of podcasts. The Jesan Sorrells audio experience is on Spotify and Google Play and all these other podcast services, Stitcher, iTunes. But you can also check out the Earbud U podcast, which I've been running for the last couple of years. If you'd like to be a guest on the Earbud U podcast, I'm always looking for new guests. That's a more business-focused podcast where we talk about the kinds of things that Debbie and I have been talking about today. You can visit my YouTube channel. Just type Jesan Sorrells into YouTube and you'll see my YouTube channel there. I have about 40 or 50 videos there, and we'll be recording more as this video gets on YouTube as well. And of course, you can visit my Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can connect with me via LinkedIn if you want to connect with me professionally, to have me come in and work with your organization and work with your people. Or, you can send me an email. My email address is the letter J, SORRELLS, at hsconsultingandtraining.com.
Jesan, thank you so much for being here today.
Debbie, thank you for having me.
Oh, it was awesome.
It was great. I loved this. This was fabulous.
Show your T-shirt before we get off the air, because I know the other one.
Oh, the other one. Yeah, the other one. I forgot about this one. Oh gosh, I got yes.
He's a maniac.
My wife wanted me to bring this T-shirt for today for the filming, so she brought this for me. So this is a shout out to my wife. This is a great shirt with a body like this. Who needs hair?
The beautiful Bridget. She's always picking on.
She's supporting me.
They are so in love. It's wonderful. It's
she supports me. She makes me look beautiful. As a matter of fact, she's the one that took took the picture for the book there, and she does all of my images for me, and she makes me look beautiful. So this is a shout out to my wife, Bridget.
Yeah, shout out for Bridget. And thank you, Zach, for another wonderful show.
Thank you, Zach.
And thank you, our viewers, for being here today with Jesan and myself. I hope that in some small way we've been able to impact your work relationships and the way that you deal with conflict on the job. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.